Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us for the learning of Torah Hashem, Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach, as we learn and start Baruch Shechianu V'Kimanu V'Gyanu Lazman Hazeh to the start of Chumash Devorim, known as Mishnah Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu, before his passing, he reviewed the Torah with Klal Yisroel. It's known as Mishnah Torah. And we thank TorahAnytime.com for giving us this magnificent platform to teach Torah all over the world. We thank Kol Haloshen as well for its global network, Torah Communications Network. We thank YouTube and Facebook, our Zoomers, our digital subscribers, and all those of you that are joining us here in our flagship station as I'm back in Lakewood at the Yisroel Beis Zev of Fairways, Lakewood. Tonight we have a very, very dear sponsor, the Klein and the Jaffe families, Ilui Nishmas, their mother, Gittel Bas Shimon Pinchas, whose yahrzeit is now. The Neshama should have an aliyah. She should be a Melitzis Yeshara for our family, for all of us and all of Klal Yisrael. And to my dear Zoom daffer, Shimon Klein, a subscriber of mine, together with his wife for many, many years. He should have a refuah shalema, Shimon Yehuda ben Gittel, b'soich shar chayil Yisrael. Vayiba Arba Mishana, it was 40 years, so Moshe spoke to the Bnei Yisrael. So a lot of times the Balaturim says a word in its form is found only 2 times in the entire Tanakh, and he makes a connection. So he says, "Vayi ba'arbaim shana." The word ba'arbaim is found twice in Tanakh over here, and another time in Shoftim, where it says "Mogain im yireh," if you will see a shield, v'roimach, or a spear, affecting Ba'arbaim Elef B'Yisrael, 40,000 of Yisrael. So again it says Ba'arbaim. So the Balaturim quotes a Tana Debei Eliyahu. The Tana Debei Eliyahu says, Loimer, im yeh Talmid Chacham Echad Bein Arbaim Elef, if there'll be even one Talmid Chacham amongst 40,000 people, Ein Srichin Loy Mogain V'Loy Roimach, they will not need a shield nor a spear. Ki Talmid Chacham Megim Aleim Me'oveim, because the Talmid Chacham protects them from their enemies. Because he says that over there, how do we know that there's a linkage with the Talmid Chacham? Because it says over there in Shoftim, the pasuk continues, "Libi l'chaykekei Yisrael," my heart to the lawgivers of Israel. No, it's a Talmid Chacham. So if there's one Talmid Chacham amongst 40,000, you don't need a Mogain, you don't need a Raimach. And you hear over here also where it says Arbam, there's a linkage to Torah, because it says Hayel Moshe be'eres HaTorah. Hashem, Moshe started to explain the Torah. Now we learned already this klal in Bava Basra that Chachamim lo yiboyin tirusin. The first parak, we said that sages do not need protection. In the tax for the Igle Gapa, for the walls of the city, cannot be levied against the Talmidei Chacham, because the Talmidei Chachamim don't need protection. But that's for them themselves. Here we see that one Talmid Chacham could protect 40,000 people. And that's the idea, Hakol Kol Yaakov, Vayadayim Medei Esav. The strength of Yaakov is in its voice. And if you look at Hakol Kol Yaakov, one is written defective. So we read it only when Hakol Kol Yaakov, only when the Kol of Yaakov is weakened, only then is Yadayim Yadei Esav. Only then is there strong the hands of Esav. Now, even though we usually translate the Kol of Yaakov as the voice of tefillah. But actually, that would be the voice of Yitzchak. Yitzchak was the Amud Ha'avodah of tefillah. Vayetze Yitzchak l'suach basada, sicha is tefillah. Yaakov, on the other hand, is the Amud of Torah. Right? We know that it says, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, or Yaakov ish tam yoshev oyalim. What does it mean that he sat in oyalim? It's the oil shem ve'ever, the tents of shem ve'ever. So, the protection of Klal Yisrael against the might of Esav is the Kel Torah. Like it says, Yanucha Hashem b'yom tzara. Hashem will answer you in a day of distress. Yisagevcha, you will be delivered by Shem Elikei Yaakov. Now, why not Elikei Avram? Why not Elikei Yitzchak? So even though the chesed of Avram is a protection, and the tefillah of Yitzchak is a protection, but Hashem answers us in the schus of Shem Elikei Yaakov. That's the schus of Torah. That's what it says. Eilav Arechev, Ve'elav Asusim. They come with their chariots. They come with their horses. V'anachnu b'shem Hashem Elokeinu naskir. Now, again, that sounds like tefillah. But it says that Kol HaTorah Kula Shemais Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The whole Torah is really names of Hashem. So v'anachnu b'shem Hashem Elokeinu naskir also refers to Torah. Therefore, today, when there is fear and even terror that Iran should unleash a ferocious battery of 1,000 missiles and drones at one time, overwhelming the defenses of Klal Yisrael, we have to know that the Schus Torah protects us. And even one Talmid Chacham protects from 40,000 people. It's a Fairways in this week's parasha. Hashem Elokeichem here be'eschem. Hashem Elokeichem will increase you. V'hinchem hayom, and you are today k'koichvei hashamayim l'roiv, like the stars in the heaven to its multitude. Now, of course, Rashi has an obvious question. We're not like the stars of heaven. We were 600,000. The distant solar systems with its stars are many more than 600,000. So what does it mean? Hinchem hayom k'choichvei hashamayim l'roiv. Even Rashi knew at the time that there were more than 600,000 stars in the sky. So what does it mean? Hinchem hayom k'koichvei hashamayim l'roiv. So Rashi says it's not talking about quantitatively, it's talking about qualitatively, and that the shine of Klal Yisrael, their tremendous level. They were the Dordeya, the generation of knowledge. They were shining like the stars of the sky. So Rav Zalman Sorotzkin, the Oznaim L'Torah, the Oznaim L'Torah asks an obvious question. Right before saying this, Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Lo yuchal levadi lo seis eschem." I cannot alone bear you. I cannot hold the burden. It doesn't seem to compute if they were shining like the stars in the sky, and they were such paragons of virtue. Then why did Moshe Rabbeinu say that he wouldn't be able to tolerate them? So Rav Zalman Sorotzkin gives an answer that is very contemporary. It applies very much to the modern condition. He says it's specifically because you were so advanced that it's hard to deal with you. Because you all thought that you knew better. I call this the Kulanu Chachamim Kulanu Devorim syndrome. You know, if you have a shul of Balei Tshuva that are just starting out, so then they're ready to listen to whatever you say. But if you have a shul made up of younger like that were learning in Kollel for 10 years, they all think they know better. Moshe Rabbeinu said it's not easy. All of you thought, look what happened with Kairach. He thought he knew better. By the way, this is not only an issue with a shul of B'nai Torah and Talmidei Chacham. That's a very difficult thing for a rabbi. Because they all think they know better. Or they know at least as much. It's also very difficult to be a rabbi of a shul with a lot of rich people. See, rich people are used to getting their way. They are surrounded the whole day with people that take their commands. They work for them. They're underlings. And also they feel they know better. Look, most of the people are not rich. I'm rich. So I know I make the right decisions. That's why Rava, the great Talmudist Rava, he had a difficult kill. He was the Rav of Mechuzah. Mechuzah was a port city. Moshe says the people of Balabatim Mechuzah were very wealthy. And I want to suggest that that's why Rava uses a strange terminology when he talks to them. B'matusa minaychu, I plead with you. For example, he said to them, B'matusa minaychu, I plead with you. O kiru nishaychu, honor your wives, ki echi d'tisasu. I'll give you advice. You want to keep on holding your money? Honor your wives. Because ein bracha shriya b'sek beisa shaladam, ela b'shmal ishtoi. Shenamar ala Avram heitiv bavura. But why did Rava have to say, I plead with you? Since when is that the terminology of a rabbi? I plead with you? But Rava had to deal with rich people. Not easy to deal with rich people. You have to plead with them. Ushvatetem tzedek. Of course, this is the directive in the Torah of b'tzedek tishbeit amisecha. You should judge your friend righteously. In the Tufchi Yabiyu, Reb Zilberstein tells of a story that happened in his days in Choloin. I know Choloin because my wife's maternal grandparents are buried in the cemetery in Cholon. We went there. After looking for the graves for quite a while, we found the graves of Rabbi and Mrs. Hyman, very, very special people. My Shashi's maternal grandfather gave Daf Yomi and finished Shas several times. My wife says she remembers as a little girl, her grandfather would show her proudly the whole Shas and say that he learned all of these books. So when Rav Zilberstein was Rav in Cholon, so there was a pious chazan, and several balabatim came over to him and told him, confused, we go near the bima during Musaf, and we hear money rattling from the chazan's pocket on Shabbos. And they all said that the chazan is a Yerushalayim, but they can't understand he has money in his pocket. So the Rav thought it was ridiculous, but he went himself to check it out, and he heard coins rattling in the pocket. So no, he's the Rav. He's responsible to check it out. So he goes over to the Chazan and he gently says, perhaps you forgot and you're wearing your weekday pants. So the Chazan understood right away, and he said that these coins were given to him as a kemeya from Reb Itzchak Antwerpen. Reb Itzchak Antwerpen from Antwerp was a very, very big tzaddik, and he said that he gave me these coins as a kemeya, as an amulet, and therefore, since I was maktzit, I designated it as a kemeya, as an amulet, and it came from a big tzaddik. It's not muktzah. So Rav Zilberstein used this as an example of how we have to fulfill b'tzedek tishbei ramisecha. We all know what the Welt says, that why did the Rebbeinu Shalom create krumkeit, crooked thinking? Because sometimes you need to think crooked in order to be done people a kafschus. But I have something that I'd like to add to this story. And that is, I believe it was a chiyuv for the chazan to alert people that he had a kmeya in his pocket. Because remember, we learned last week that there's an inyan of a yisem nekiyah ma'ashem Yisroel. That you have to be clean in people's eyes. You see, a few people heard the money rattling and suspected him. So you have to tell people, by the way, if you hear coins in my pocket, it's an amulet. I think that's part and parcel of what we said is the obligation for a person to guard their shem tov. Now, my wife, Shashi, Zolzai Gezun, is an LCSWR of great skill. And she has modalities that are really awesome. EMDR, IFS, where she helps people be healed from their previous traumas. There's an Orach Chaim HaKadosh in Parshas Beshalach who talks about trauma. What's an example of trauma? The Holocaust survivor that sees a uniform person coming at him and gets very frightened because it reminds him of the Gestapo. Or if he hears an explosion, he thinks they're coming to get him. Those are examples of the triggers of trauma. So the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says Hashem, in His kindness, wanted to heal Klal Yisrael from the terrible trauma of Egypt. It says in this week's Parsha, K'chol asher osa eschem b'Mitzrayim le'einechem. What I did in Mitzrayim in front of your eyes. So the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says that there's a stupendous miracle that happened at Yam Suf. It says that at the Yam Suf, each Jew, even though there were 9 million Egyptians at the Red Sea, because it says we were 3 million, and they came v'shalishim al kulay, 3 against 1. Yet a miracle happened that each Jew, when they were in the Yam Suf, bumped into the Egyptian that tormented them. And they said to them, "Why did you do this to us?" And the Jew took his dog and had it bite off the hand of the Egyptian. That's a medrash. Says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, Hashem did that the Jew should have closure. He should see that the Egyptian that tormented him lost his hand. He's not going to come and get him anymore. And then, to cap it off, they saw all the Mesim kicked out of the Yam Suf onto the beach. And they saw their enemies dead. So they knew it was over. They had closure. This was all to heal them of trauma. That's what the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says. That's a fascinating Orach Chaim HaKadosh. V'lo avisem la'alois. So it says that you didn't want to go up. This is, of course, the terrible story of the Meraglim. V'lo avisem la'alois. You didn't want to go up. V'tamru espi Hashem Elokeichem. You rebelled against Hashem. So Rabbi Dr. Twersky makes an interesting diak. It doesn't say that they didn't trust Hashem, that he'd be able to conquer the giants of Canaan. It says, you didn't really have the will to go. You were very happy to return back to Egypt. If it was something that you really wanted, it would be different, but you didn't really want to go. And Rabbi Dr. Twersky, he makes a very interesting observation. He says there's a Maimer Chazal, and there's also an American saying. The Maimer Chazal is Ein Davar Oimed B'fnei Haratzon. Nothing stands in the way of a will. If you remember, I told you that when I wrote my first Sefer Passion in Judaism, so they gave it back to me and they said there's 1,000 quotes without attribution, and they wanted attribution. They wanted attribution for sources, and one of them was Ein Davar Oimed B'fnei Haratzon. Nothing stands in the way of a will. So a lot of the quotes, I used search engines, and I couldn't find anywhere in Chazal where it said Ein Davar Oimed B'fnei Haratzon. So ArtScroll has more powerful search engines, so I called my brother, and they used their search engine, and they couldn't find it either. So in the summer, I had a relationship with the Skolya Rebbe. So I asked the Skolya Rebbe. The Skolya Rebbe said it's a maimer of Rav Nachman Mebresev. That the great Rav Nachman Mebresev is the makar of Ein Davar Oimed B'fnei Haratzon. Okay. But there's an American saying. The American saying is, if there's a will, there's a way. It sounds pretty similar. But Rabbi Twersky makes the very astute observation that the two are not similar at all. If there's a will, there's a way, it's not practical. If somebody is tone deaf, they're not going to become an opera singer. It's just not happening. So if there's a will, there's a way, it's not always true. But nothing stands in the way of having a will. That's true. And Hashem wants us to have the will. Sometimes we won't be able to do it. Like it says, Chishav lasis mitzvah v'nenes. If you planned to do something but you couldn't do it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu considers it as if you did it. But the important thing is to have the will. And here the Moshe Rabbeinu is telling them, V'lo avisem lalos. You didn't want to, Eddie, mute yourself. V'lo avisem lalos. You didn't want to go up. You didn't want to go up. And I was thinking, one of the big things in life is to have a ratzon. I explained to you many times that the Chachmei HaKabbalah say that ratzon is the same letters as tzinar, a pipeline, a conduit. Because when you have a ratzon, that creates a conduit, a pipeline from bracha from Shemayim. That's why it says, "B'derech she'adam reitza leleches malichin oisei." The way a person wants to go, they're led. And that's why the guide says, "Bereishis" stands for b'tochen ratzon, ava shtika yira and Torah. Ratzon is one of the big things. And the truth of the matter is here, when we're definitely in the ikvus of the Mashiach, the times of Mashiach, there's a lot of people who don't really have a will that Mashiach should come. You know, I'm happy with my life. I like my bungalow. I like my car. I like my friends. You know, Mashiach can come, but I'm not in a rush. We say, Hashem is going to want to know, did you want him to come? There was a taina. This is something we have to think during the 9 days. When we're in mourning because we don't have a base of English. We're mamish mourning. On Tisha B'Av, we're going to practice an Avelis Chadasha. We won't sit. We won't wear shoes like it's a new Avelis. Do we really want Mashiach to come? Now, it says by the Meraglim, "Vayishma Hashem es kol divreichem." Hashem heard the voice of your words. Vayiktzayf, and he got angry. So obviously the word voice is a little bit superfluous. It should say, "Vayishma Hashem es divreichem." Hashem heard your words that you didn't want to go to Eretz Yisrael, and he got angry. What's kol divreichem? Obviously, it has to be the voice of your words. What else is it? The word kol seems to be redundant. So we know that they brought from the fat fruit of Eretz Yisrael. And it says that 8 people carried 1 cluster of grapes. Now, a cluster of grapes we could hold with our pinky. And here, the grapes of Eretz Yisrael, it took 8 people to carry 1 cluster. So when the Meraglim were showing the fruit, so what did they say? They said, "Zovas kolov dvashi." It's a land flowing with milk and honey. Vizeh peria, and this is its fruit. But the Medrash says, how did they say vizeh peria? Ay, vizeh peria. What kind of people eat grapes that takes 8 people to carry 1 cluster? They're giants. We have no chance. It was the inflection of their voice, how they said vizeh peria. They weren't praising the land, vizeh peria. Ay, vizeh peria. What chance do we have? That's the kale, the inflection of their voice. I remember that I once had a couple come to me, and the wife had complaints, and the husband said, "I told you I would do all of these things." So she said in front of me, "Yes, you did tell me. But Rabbi Weiss, you should see how he told it to me." And the way you talk to a person is extremely important. The quality of a marriage can be determined if a person uses satire in their voice, if a person has a condescending voice, if a person mimics, if a person speaks as if to a child. That's the Kel Chassan V'Kel Kala. There's a special tender voice between a Chassan and a Kala. And if that's missing, that's a big problem. The Chavetz Chaim famously said that you could be over Lashon Hara even without saying anything. If somebody mentions a person's name to you and you grimace, you could be over Lashon Hara. And it's known that the pasuk that says Ki ba'apam hargu ish, with their nose. Now, literally, apam means anger, but af is also a nose. With a nose, you could kill someone by making with your nose at somebody. It's interesting because it says that Hashem blew the neshama into the nose because the nose is the purest organ. It's very hard to sin with the nose. While it's easy to sin with the ears and the eyes and the mouth, it's extremely difficult to figure out a way to sin with the nose. You could sin with your nose. You could smell basa b'chalav, which is asa b'hana. You could pass by a church and smell the incense of idolatry, which is asa b'hana. But it's very hard to sin with the nose. But if you make with your nose at a person, that's how you can sin with the nose. By the way, that's why the nose is at the center of the face. Before DNA and before dental records, the Gemara said, "Ein pirtzav panim b'loy chaytim." You cannot identify a person without a nose. The nose is the determining feature of a person's face. You know why? Why is the nose in the center? Because the nose is the organ of the neshama. And that has to be front and center by a person. That's why it says that the Kohen Gadol, at the end of the second temple, who was usually a tzedaki, and would go into the Kodesh Kedoshim and do the Avodah wrong, the Tzedokim had a different opinion of how the Avodah should be done. They would find the Kohen Gadol dead with maggots crawling out of his nose. So they ask, why out of his nose? Because the nose was the first organ to enter illegally into the Kodesh Kadosh. That's why when we go, our nose goes first. Why? Because the nose represents the spiritual. That's why. Why do you think it's a Yiddish panim, a Yiddish face? Because a Yiddish face, the ikar is the pneumius, what's inside the person. That's panim, is pneumius. Hashem elikecha imach. Hashem, your God, was with you in the midbar. Loi chasarta davar. You didn't lack anything. Now we say this sentiment and mention it when we thank Hashem. We say V'dorshei Hashem, those that seek Hashem lo yachzeru chol tov, lack from nothing good. We actually make a bracha to this effect. In the morning, in Birchas HaShachar, we say, She'asol li kol tzarki. You do for me all my needs. Everybody says that bracha. Now, we say it in the past. She'asol li kol tzarki. Why? Because looking back, we could say we made it. Hashem made everything for me. At the time, we don't see it. What do you mean I can't pay my mortgage? What do you mean I can't pay my children's tuition? But after the fact, we say Sha'asali Kol Tzarki. That's V'dorsha Hashem Lo Yachzru Chol Tov. Now, But it also says, Oyev kesef lo yizba kesef. Somebody that loves money never has enough money. And it says, Mi sheyesh leimana writes a masayim. Somebody has 100, wants 200. But it's more than that. If you want to have 1 million, you want 2 million. If you have 10 million, you want 20 million. Why? Because it says, Ein on the mace, b'chatzi tavasa b'yadai, having fulfilled half of his needs. So on the one hand, a Darsha Hashem doesn't lack from anything. That's what Yaakov Avinu said, Yesh li kol. I have everything. A Darsha Hashem has everything. On the other hand, the person who loves money never has enough. That's why the word for money is matbeya. Matbeya comes from the shirish tava, to drown. People are drowning in money. They just never have enough. They're drowning because the more they have, the more they want. It's like a quicksand. What does it say in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos? Ezo asher hasameach b'chelkei. Who is wealthy? Somebody who is satisfied with what they have. Meaning that wealth is an attitude. It's not about assets. It's about a way to look at life. A way to look at life. Right? We were in the midbar, v'lo chasarta davar. V'darsha Hashem lo yachseru kol tov. That's why it's a beautiful study in etymology. The word b'simcha, with joy, is the same letters exactly, not just gematria, the same letters. If you do a jumble with b'simcha, you get the letters of machshava. Because happiness is an attitude. It's an attitude. It's an amazing thing. Like Reb Noach Weinberg said, if you're not happy with what you have now, you'll never be happy with what you're going to get. Because you'll get used to that also. You have to learn to be happy with what we have. Now, remember what did we do in the midbar? Where it says, Lo chasarta davar. What were we doing the whole day? We didn't have jobs. There were no fields to work. There were no stores to buy things. We had nothing to plant. We didn't have businesses. The clothing grew with us. The shoes didn't wear out. Mun came down from Mitzrayim. Beverages came from the Be'er. We learned Torah. Learning Torah, that's Darsha Hashem lo yachzeru kol tov. Ein tov ela Torah. Shenema ki lekach tov nasati lachem. Torah is the true simcha of life. As it says, Ein simcha ke simcha satayra. There's no joy like the joy of Torah. It says, Torah Hashem Tmima, the Torah of Hashem is perfect, Meshivas Nefesh, it rejuvenates the soul. Pikudei Hashem Yesharim, Mesamchei Leiv. Vateirognu ba'ahalechem, you complained in your tents, V'taimru, and they said, B'sinas Hashem oisanu, because Hashem hates us, Haitzianu me'eretz Mitzrayim, He took us out of Mitzrayim, lahashmidenu, to destroy us. What kind of accusation that Hashem hates us and He wants to destroy us? So the Sifurnai says that they were alluding to the fact that Hashem hates them because we worshipped idolatry in Egypt. Remember the Malachim by the Yamsuf said, We worshipped idolatry in Egypt. Right? It says we worshipped we were naked and barren for mitzvahs. So they said Hashem hates us. He wants to destroy us. So Rabbi Ruvain Melamed and the Sefer Melitz Yosha, they both say the same thing. They say, could you imagine? The Yetzer Hara gets us to sin and disobey Hashem. He wanted us to go into Yisroel, and we would say, Hashem wants to destroy us, and we use Yiras HaOynish, the fear of punishment, in order to sin. Now, if you think a little bit about it, it's ridiculous. If Hashem wanted to destroy us, why did he do the 10 Makkos? Why did he split the sea? Why did he support us with mud? Why did he make the great miracle of the Be'er? But that's the power of the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara confuses people. Hashem wants to destroy us because we sinned with idolatry. How powerful the Yetzer Hara is, we can know this from just seeing somebody smoking. Today, with the knowledge of how many carcinogens there are in a cigarette, with the knowledge of how many people die from heart disease from cigarette, with the knowledge of how we affect our family with secondhand smoke, how can anybody smoke? But the Yetzer Hara gets thousands of people, tens of thousands of people to smoke. Yetzer Hara is a very, very, very crafty power. And we learn it. The Torah shows us constantly how people are misled by the Yetzer Hara. Forewarned is forearmed. We have to be very careful from the Yetzer Hara. Now we know that this past Shabbos we benched Rosh Chodesh Av. And the Chazan, when he benched Rosh Chodesh, said, Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av. That's what we call it. We don't call it Av. We call it Menachem Av. The comfort of Av. And the question is, why do we call it Menachem Av? It says, Mishenichnas Av Matin B'Simcha. We minimize our Simcha. It's a time where we increase Avelis, not Nechama. Why is it called Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av? Now, the Tamei Minhagim, the Sefer Tamei Minhagim, when I was a boy, every house had a Tamei Minhagim. Every house had a Tamei Minhagim. Sefer Tamei Minhagim says Menachem Av means that there's comfort with the Aleph base. Because the kinnis that we say is a lot of times done with acrostics of an Aleph base. The first sentence is with an Aleph and then a base. Eicha was written in the order of the Aleph base. And that's Menachem Av, the Chama through the Aleph base. Another reason why it's called Menachem Av is because we're comforting our Father in heaven. When we abstain from wine and meat and don't listen to music and don't cut our hair and don't go swimming and don't have weddings, and we use it as a springboard to reflect that it was the Sinas Chinam and the Lashon Hara that we spoke at the time that caused the destruction of the temple. So this causes us to do tshuva, and that's a nechama to our Father in heaven. It's Menachem Av. We're comforting our Father in heaven. There's another reason why it's called Menachem Av. The Gemara tells us that Aleph Beis Gimel Daled is Aluf Bina Gaimel Dalim. Learn Torah and be benevolent to the poor. The question was, why was the Beis Hamikdash destroyed? We learned a lot of Torah. Why didn't Torah protect us? The Torah protects. The Torah is Megan Umatzlay, and it's Kisris B'fnei HaParoniyos. And the Gemara tells us in Masechtas Nedarim, Mipnei Sheloi Berchu B'Torah Tchila. We didn't make a proper Birchas HaTorah. There was a chesaron in our appreciating the gift of Torah. So Aleph Beis is Aluf Bina. We're Menachem. We comfort by Aluf Bina, by learning with understanding. And also Aleph Beis is Omer Bracha. He's saying properly the Birchas HaTorah. There's something else. And that is that we know that we mourn over the Torah, we mourn over the temple. How was the temple built? Yodeya B'Tzalel. B'Tzalel knew. L'tzarei for Oisiyos. To combine the letters Shabai Nivru Shamayim Varetz. That's what it says. And that's how B'Tzalel was skilled. It says the world was created with different blends of the Aleph Beis. That's Bereshis Bara Lekim S. Hashem created the world with S, with Aleph through Taf. B'Tzalel knew how to do that. So Menachem Av, we comfort Hashem by trying to correct the reason why the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, which was made by the Aleph Beis, which was made by the combinations of the Aleph Beis. The Welt says another thing. The Welt says that Menachem Av, the reason why the Chodesh is called Av, is because we hope that it should be nepach miyagayin l'simcha, to change from grief to happiness, me'evel liyamtiv, from mourning to a good day. So we hope that Av, Aleph Beis, switches to Ba, that Mashiach should come. That's what we're hoping that the Av, Menachem Av, should switch to Ba, that the Mashiach should come to us. Today was the yahrzeit of my dear father, Herman Weiss, Hershey Weiss, Reb Aaron Tzvi ben Rameir. He had a short life. His life was cut at the age of 61. The beginning of his life was in the horrors of the Holocaust in Auschwitz. He had numbers on his hand. And the end of his life was with the horrors of pancreatic cancer. Before he passed away, he told me that the pain was erger from the Nazis. Something that's usually unimaginable that a Holocaust survivor would say, that something was worse than the Nazis. But in his short life, he made an impression. He made an impression. He was a man of peace, like his name, Aaron. He was a man of peace. He was a Gabbai Sheni in the Svardish Shul downstairs. And it was his job to calm people down, that they shouldn't be upset that they didn't get an aliyah, or they didn't get the aliyah that they wanted. And he knew how to take care of ruffled feathers. You know, my father is an example of how a parent should teach by example. My father always took out my mother regularly to a restaurant. He wasn't a wealthy man, but I remember twice a week he took the family out. Once the famous restaurant, a dairy restaurant on 13th Avenue, and one to Schick's on the second floor on 13th Avenue for fleisches. Because he did that, I know my brothers and I took out our wives. And because we did that, that's what all of our children do. That's teaching by example. The best way for a parent to teach. My father, although he was a Holocaust survivor, gave us a very normative upbringing, and he gave us memories for American boys. American boys. I remember how there was a time that we were very into baseball cards. And everybody wanted to get a Mike Schmidt, and everybody wanted to get a team card. I remember how excited we were to get a pack of baseball cards. Maybe we would get the card that we needed, or a card that we could trade with our friends. I remember how he would come home and he said, he would shake his coat pocket, what do I have it over here? And he would show that he had some baseball cards. We would squeal with delight, and then he would shake his other side, say, oh, what do I have here? He wanted to make his family happy. I remember my father had a very hard life. He got up for the early minyan in the Swedish Shul. Then he went by train and stayed in a dark factory with 80 workers until 6 o'clock in the night, from early in the morning, and then he would come back home by train again. But I remember that on Erev Shabbos he would go to a special bakery on Fort Hamilton Avenue, even though there were many bakeries that were good close to the house. But he knew that this bakery had the most delicious cinnamon buns, the most delicious, fresh, fat cinnamon buns that we liked. So we would go always to get us those cinnamon buns. I remember it. And you know, I'm 65 now. I remember these cinnamon buns from 55 years ago. That's the power of the memories that a parent can make. Very important thing. A parent making memories. And this is a Holocaust survivor. This is a man who lost his father and mother, 4 brothers and sisters in one day. Mengele Yamach Shemam sent them to the gas chambers the first day that the second Selush transplant arrived in Auschwitz. That's the incredible spirit of a human being. May his neshama have an aliyah. I want to apologize for my voice this evening. I seem to be under the weather. Hopefully in the schus of the Shiur I should have a refuah shalema quickly. Thank you very much for joining us. We want to thank Shimon Klein, the Klein and Jaffe families, Lili Nishmas, Gittel Bar Shimon Pinchas. We want to also mention that if you would like to sponsor for Eschanan, for Shabbos Nachmu, 718-916-3100. That's 718-916-3100. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful Shabbos.